Leaders operate on the souls of their followers. They do, for good or for ill. And if we who are at the university see ourselves, as I think we should, as educational leaders, we need to recognize that in our teaching, in our interactions with our students, in our development of doctoral programs and cohorts, we're operating on the souls of our students. And we have to be very conscious and intentional about the kinds of actions and discourses that we engage in. One of my students, who in the first class, not in the cohort I was studying, but in a different class on democracy and politics, was whispering to the person beside her throughout the whole weekend. Sometimes we teach Friday night and all day Saturday, 4 weekends, to get in the 48 hours. All weekend she was saying, "This is nonsense. This is ridiculous. She doesn't understand our situation in schools. We can't do this." And I guess I should have said, and meant to say earlier, I do understand the situation in schools. We have to prepare kids for the tests. And passing tests is not a bad thing. Accountability is not a bad thing. The framework, the curriculum standards, as you said earlier, are basic minimum. But we've got to go so much beyond that. My thesis is that deep democracy, social justice, are simply the ways of preparing the conditions in which students can learn. That they're not polar opposites, there shouldn't be a tension between them. We have to create inclusive, socially just, democratic school environments if all kids are going to be connected to the learning environment in any way. This student who thought it was stupid wrote me 2 months after the class ended, after she'd received her grade, so she wasn't looking for anything from me, and basically said, "Your class has probably had the greatest influence on my thoughts about education. The class has reshaped my paradigm about education for deep democracy and my responsibility to assume formally or informally that role." And I think that's the kind of thing that we're looking for from our students, a sense that our programs have changed their paradigm and can change their paradigm. I think I've done what Allison asked me to do, and that's share my little bit of a research project with you and some of my beliefs, and I'm willing to answer questions if you have any. Thank you. Yes?
Carolyn, thanks very much. It's very interesting. I'm interested to see why you graded your reflective weekly journals. Why did you give them a grade?
Well, it happened when I was first a professor, as an assistant professor at the University of Utah first, and then the University of British Columbia. And I always got really good teaching evaluations, except for the column or the statement that said, we have good ongoing feedback in a class and I know where I stand, because as in most graduate programs, we were giving a paper midterm and a paper at the end, or an exam midterm. And so what I really was trying to do was get rid of that lower column on my evaluations. And so I thought, well, if I start asking students to do something on a weekly basis and grading it and giving them feedback, they'll know where they stand. So it was pretty self-serving at the very beginning. It's not anymore. I mean, I've kept on doing it because it's been so powerful as a way of having an individual dialogue with each student.
I completely agree how powerful it would be. I'm just wondering why you actually give it a numerical value and not just the feedback itself.
Because they're so driven by grades that they want to know where they stand. And it's a way of basically saying, if they see that they're getting 5 out of 5, it does a number of things. Because I give them really high grades on their journals, it allows me to be much tougher on their final papers, and for the ballots to still put them where they want to be in a graduate program. So they're less concerned if I give them a B- or a really low grade on a final paper and really critique it as they're learning to write better towards their dissertations as well. So it does a number of things. It says, you can disagree with me and still get a perfect grade. And the feedback can say that, but it isn't, they don't believe it until they see a 5 out of 5, right? So it does that. It convinces them that they can disagree with me, and it gives them ongoing feedback from day one, and it provides for me a balance so that I can mark them harder on things that are more important.
Very much for that, Carolyn. It was very fascinating. First a comment and then maybe a question. Is that photograph of the child on that lady's lap a gift to you?
A gift in the sense that we had the last class of this particular, these were my students, they were a mixture of PhD and EDD students. And the baby was about 2 days old. And she came to class, we held it in my house and brought the baby because that was the way she could come to class. So in many ways that is a gift. If a student who's had a baby 2 days before is willing to come to class, that's a gift.
Well, the question is, it's not a challenge, it's just a question. You experienced professor, education, talk, know the language of democracy and justice and equity. Yet you said, they come to me to learn about equity, democracy and so on. Other professors they go to look at other issues. So, excuse me, so what's your role and your challenge and your mantra for educating the others who do not talk at all?
Really good question. When I first went to the University of Illinois, for example, 5 years ago, we, as a group, decided we were going to rewrite our departmental mission statement. And we expressed in it that the department was about social justice and had a commitment to social justice and equity. And so almost every department meeting, I asked the question about whether we could look at our syllabi, whether we really were dealing with social justice and equity, whether it was just lip service on the website in terms of our mission statement. And one day, one of my senior colleagues who'd been there a long time said, well, you and Brad do social justice, so the rest of us don't need to. Well, it was interesting because that particular colleague had been a major urban school superintendent and taught courses called School Improvement and the Superintendency, among others. And I called him on it. I said, come on now, you can't tell me that you can teach school improvement without looking at this, this, and this. And I know that when you teach the superintendency, you deal with these things, and aren't they social justice issues too? So it's a constant conversation. Increasingly, unfortunately, many of my colleagues talk the talk, but their content hasn't changed. And it's still very technical and very rational. And so there's that tension. And that's one reason why I talk to my students and say, you're going to get a lot of the balancing literature, the rational, technical, if you know Morgan's images of organization, some of the early metaphors in the other courses, I'm going to focus on these particular topics. It's a reality, something I'm working at constantly, but it changes slowly when people have their courses set. They've been teaching them for a long time. I didn't say anything very outrageous, did I? He told me he wanted me to say something outrageous. Maybe that is the outrageous piece, that, universities really are still hiring people to teach in programs that haven't changed for a long time, and to teach existing courses. And we need to be hiring for the 21st century and 21st century schools, and not programs that existed 20 years ago, 50 years ago.
I think democracy is about numbers. Probably the deep democracy is about quality. Because the number of students that I see about 8, probably you have.
That was just that particular group, but yeah.
Okay, but like if you say that you give them to write works, 1,800 words, and then you actually analyze those. Can you do it in a class when we actually teach, I think, about 100 or 150 students?
I don't know. I do it in, I think I do about 40 a week right now.